and your mics for now, or mute them. We're not, if you have questions, the best thing to do is probably use the chat function on Teams if you can. That way, just type it in, ask the question. I'll be more than happy to answer it. Or if you really need to, feel free to unmute your mic and ask the question that way. As Phil mentioned at the beginning of this, he's recording it. So for any of our friends who couldn't make it today, we'll go ahead and get them trained up on this stuff as well. I want to say thank you to those of you guys who made it from California. I know there's a handful of you from Sully Miller who missed our session last week and were asked to participate this week. So I know there's a few of you guys from the West Coast. So thank you for joining us at an early hour. Although knowing most of you guys out there, you guys usually start your day around 5 a.m. So you've already been working for 3 hours more than me. At any rate, like I said, go ahead and mute your mics, turn off your cameras so we don't get any feedback, save on the bandwidth just in case we've got a lot of people joining in. Like I said, if you have a question, use the chat function or feel free to unmute and ask it directly. But with that, we'll get started. For those of you guys who don't know me or are new to the company in the past year or so or haven't been part of these sessions before, my name is Dan LaFrance. I am the Colas Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer, also the company's Assistant General Counsel. So I'm an attorney here out in the East Coast in lovely New Jersey. I've been with the company for about 15 years, and I've been doing this type of training for quite a while. The only difference now is we've moved to the remote platform on Teams, primarily in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the future, we might choose to do this a little bit more regularly using Teams. I mean, we're not going to do more sessions, but using Teams as a vehicle, and then saving the location visits for more significant or in-person issues or testing or training or whatever. So far we've been doing these sessions for all the companies throughout the U.S. from Alaska all the way down to Virginia and New York and Ohio, and it's been pretty effective. So if you have any comments or any questions about how it goes, or any of the information or anything like that, please, or the format, please let me know, because I'm always trying to improve this stuff and make sure it's good for you guys. The whole goal of today is to provide you with an update and some things that have been going on from a compliance perspective. Make sure you're aware of some new regulations, some new rules, some new procedures, some new technology that's been rolled out by our parent company, Colas, that we're required to use. And Phil, from Delta's perspective, will be the sort of the primary point of contact on these issues, and especially with regard to using some of the new technology. So after today, if you have any questions about it or how it works, please follow up with Phil. And the same goes with Early out in California. It will be the point of contact at Sully Miller. So let's go ahead and get right into it. As I try to start all of my presentations to give you an idea where this information is coming from, so you know, one, I'm not making it up, and two, it does pertain to how we operate. Sort of the foundation for our compliance program here in the U.S. Begins with the Bouygues Code of Ethics. Bouygues being our parent company based in Paris, France. They have their Code of Ethics, which sets forth their expectations with regard to ethical behavior throughout their companies throughout the world. To implement that program or to implement that document and really put the words that are on paper into practice, one of the things that they've done is create the Bouygues compliance program documentation. There's a handful of documents, or I think there's 5 specific compliance program documents. I'm only really going to reference a few of them today, but I'll tell you about them first. First is conflicts of interest, anti-corruption, and antitrust. The other 2 are relate to insider trading, which basically refers to anybody who's buying or selling Bouygues or Colas stocks on any exchange around the world. To the extent you're doing that, there's certain rules and regs you got to comply with that the company has to be careful about with regard to publicly traded companies. Doesn't really affect the overwhelming majority of us. As far as the other document, it's a trade embargo and trade sanctions document, which refers to the U.S. government and other national and other nations have specific company or countries that we are not allowed to do business with. We're not allowed to buy materials from. We're not allowed to trade, engage in any trade with specifically countries like Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, a few others. Again, not really a major part of our compliance efforts here in the States, since the overwhelming majority of our business is or our materials and our source material comes from the United States. But so we're not really going to get into that today. Colas SA, our direct parent company, has created the Colas compliance procedures. You see the website where they can be found. That document, and I'm going to talk a little bit in a fair amount of detail today. There's been some updates to it with regard to process and procedure and certain rules related to a number of different topics that we're going to get into. That again is a document that we're required to use and follow through in our operations anywhere in the world. And finally, is the Colas USA Code of Conduct. You all know it as the Right Turn. There's the website. I'm going to speak a little bit about that today and how it relates, how all these documents kind of work together. Now, on the one hand, I fully understand it's a lot of material there. No one expects you to memorize it. We just want you to know where it is, how to find it if you need it, and understand that as we do every year, every employee is required to certify their understanding of and compliance with this material. And that's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. You'll be getting a notification on Colas Way about that coming up. So let's get going. New for 2021 is a new platform called eComply, and we're in the various stages of rolling it out through various companies. Each company is sort of adopting their own approach to how to use it, who's going to use it, when they're going to use it, all that stuff. But it doesn't change the fact that what has happened is Colas has created this platform to centralize the reporting requirements for their compliance processes. As you can see on the screenshot here, depending upon your profile, your user profile, you'll have a number of different types of buttons here. And I'm actually going to exit out of my presentation and show you real quick how the website how it works a little bit, so you can see kind of how it's set up. So here it is. This is my screen. Now, not everybody in the company will have their screen look like this. Being the Chief Compliance Officer, I have all these different categories that I would normally that I would have access to. The primary ones that most of you guys out in the field will have access to will be things like gifts, invitations, and conflicts of interest. Phil, being the compliance officer for our friends at Delta, and Early and at Sully Miller, will have other buttons there, which will cover things like patronage and sponsorship, which is charitable giving, professional organizations, things like that. So this is the new site. I'm gonna keep referring back to. I'm gonna keep. Oh, for the individual just joined us, welcome to the presentation. Just go ahead and mute your mic, and you can keep your camera off, so you can pay attention. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. So I'm going to refer back to this site from time to time throughout parts of the presentation, just so you kind of get an understanding of what they're trying to do. And then after the presentation, like I said, Phil and Early are well versed or not say well versed. They're getting up to speed on how this works and what it does. And if you have any questions about it, please reach out to them directly. So. Let's get back into the presentation. So here's the website. So we'll go back on. I'll start explaining some of these different buttons and how it all works as we go through this. First, like I mentioned, the Colas SA compliance procedures were created to help implement the BOIG compliance program. The whole idea behind it is the compliance program has a number of different requirements, one of which is that each company that is required to implement them needs to come up with their own set of procedures, so that the whole thing gets kind of flowed down throughout the organization. So the Colas compliance procedures is for us to use as a guidebook to complying with the various requirements of the program. There are specific areas that the procedures touch on, which we're going to get into, but they're specifically related to very significant compliance efforts and compliance areas. First of all, is third-party due diligence. The second would be gifts and invitations, corporate charitable giving and sponsorships. Joint ventures, I put an asterisk there mainly because the overwhelming majority of people in the company don't really get involved in the creation or implementation of a joint venture. So we're really not going to spend much time talking about it today. It is something that, to the extent it comes up, I would be involved in working with certain individuals at each company who's going to be involved in it. There's a section on fraud, a section on conflicts of interest, and then finally a section on membership in professional organizations. And there's a few other sections in there about purchasing and procurement and stuff. Again, not going to get into that today. I'll do a separate discussion with procurement professionals so they're aware of their obligations under that. So the first area that the compliance procedures gets into is the concept of third-party due diligence. It's something that we at Colas have been talking about for a number of years. We've been trying to really build up our approach to it and how we deal with it. But the bottom line is the most important thing to remember about third-party due diligence is that we need to know who we are dealing with. Who are we doing business with? Without, there's a number of instances over the years where I've been working here, and I know this happens throughout the country and throughout the world, where our companies get into business, we sign a contract, or we buy something from, or we enter into a partnership with, or we acquire, or we donate money to, whatever. But any third party, we get involved with some of these folks, and we've had problems with some of them in the past where their ethical approach to, or their unethical approach to doing business, or their willingness to cut corners, or their willingness to engage in corrupt behavior has caused problems for us. So the goal here is for us to figure out a way to handle the due diligence process for engaging in business relationships with third parties. So what they've done in the Colas compliance procedures is they've created several levels of scrutiny that we are to apply to a number of different entities, depending upon the type of relationship and what type of project or what type of contract it might be. The first one that the company has created is this idea of level 0 scrutiny, which is a really basic, kind of quick check on a company's operation or party's operation, or it could be an individual, it could be a consultant, it could be a vendor, it could be a subcontractor, whatever. But they want us to go, before we sign a contract with anybody or enter into any type of business relationship with anyone at all, they want the managers to take a second and go online on Google or whatnot and just do a quick search. Let's see if there's anything out there that we need to be made aware of. It's a very quick check, but sometimes you'd be surprised at the things that we turn up in this check. I'll give you an example. At one of your sister companies a number of years ago, or not, about 2 years ago, we had a vendor that we were working with that had that apparently had been this guy had created this company. He'd been arrested and actually done jail time for creating a scheme with a local sheriff whereby they would pay this guy would pay the local sheriff to get people out of local jails, some sort of work release program or something like that, to help these folks go out and work on farms, go out and work in construction or whatever it was. And it caused a big stink. A guy ended up wearing a wire, ended up contacting the local prosecutors, and the guy got arrested for bribery and corruption, and ended up doing a number of years in jail. This guy had been, once he got out of jail, he had a relationship with somebody at our company. He gave him a call. Next thing you knew, we had this guy was an approved vendor of ours, and we had no idea who he was or what he had been accused, what he had actually done prison time for. And sure enough, the guy got us into some trouble on one of our projects, and ended up and resulting in a couple of people losing their jobs, including obviously canceling this contract. But it's the kind of thing where we want to, and the reason I bring that up regarding level 0 is because if you Googled this guy's name, if you Googled the name of his friends, or if you Googled him, you Google the name of his company, this information would have come up. We would have been made aware that he had this background, he had this past, and we would not have gotten into business with him. So it's very simple. Just make sure you do this level 0 check. It's in the compliance procedures. It's very generally about what you're supposed to do. Generally, it just means just do a Google search, see what they're all about. Level 1 screening is actually not available yet. It's being developed by our friends in France. I'm being told it's coming in the coming months, maybe hopefully the first half of this year. But it's an automated screening tool which once somebody is entered into the system as an approved vendor, the screening tool will continue to screen people, run regular monitoring checks and things like that to help keep us up to date on whether any other information is available that we need to be aware of if we want to reconsider a business relationship. Level 2 is open source research, which is a little bit more involved. It's most likely going to be something that I would do, so you guys really don't need to be made aware of it in terms of you're not going to have any obligations to do it. But depending upon the type of activity that we're engaging with this company, it could be a more high risk activity, more high risk venture, more high risk project or whatever. We would probably go to we normally would work out a situation where you guys would come to me and I would conduct a little bit more in-depth research on a particular vendor, particular entity, whatever it is. It's really based on the risk mapping process. Again, it's not going to be very common, so it's not something most of us will need to be worried about. Level 3 is something that we all need to be made aware of, at least from the perspective of the different types of companies or entities that we might need to get, we might need to check here. But the bottom line is there is a digital tool which Colas SA has purchased called Compliance Catalyst. And it's much more powerful in the sense that it really targets a search in a way that even Google doesn't do, and that's why it's expensive. That's why it's so expensive that right now I'm the only one in the United States that's allowed to even use it, because they've bought a number of licenses for each country, and right now it's only one. So the way it works is as we get into different types of relationships, specifically, I'll just list it out for you. So if you're taking notes, you can write it down, or just, this is being recorded, obviously, so you'll hear it again. But anytime we are going to donate money to a charity, anytime we are going to donate money or sponsor an event or some sort of organization or something like that, anytime we're going to hire some sort of business broker or broker who's out there looking for work for our company, any commercial partnership like a joint venture partner, anytime we're looking at a company that we might consider acquiring, and then finally, any professional organization that the company is going to purchase a membership in as a member, as a company member, any one of those types of entities, we are required to do this level 3 check. It's because what I do is I then go online, I log into the system, and I go ahead and I plug a name in, and it spits out a very detailed report, talks about their compliance history, talks about it checks criminal records, public criminal records. It checks news. It checks a whole bunch of areas. Provides me a report, and if there's any red flags, the system flags it for me and allows me to investigate it further. And then it's an up or down on whether or not we engage in any sort of relationship with that third party. Again, it's not something we do all the time, but it is. I'd say probably at least every week I'm doing 3 or 4 of those checks. The companies are calling me saying, "Hey, Dan, can you run this through?" So yeah, for you guys, for most of you folks, the main thing would be any charitable giving, any sponsorship organization, any sponsorship or anything like that, or professional organizations would be the primary ones. We have run checks. We have used it to check on significant vendors that we have a question about, significant subcontractors or whatever, or we've even checked new customers, new private customers. We've run checks on that as well. It's not required, but we've done it just as an extra fail-safe, just to make sure we're getting all the proper information about this third party. And then finally, let's go back one. Finally, it's this level 4. It's a third party is hired to conduct the check. So look at it, think of it like this. It's basically like the company hiring a private investigator to conduct a very thorough check on a particular individual, a particular company or individual. Um, we've only done this a couple of times from a third-party due diligence standpoint. A couple of years back, we were retaining a brokerage to help us assess certain physical assets we had, whether it's property or other things, and the extent to which we were getting value out of it. And this broker was giving us an idea of what the value was of these pieces of property and stuff. And we went ahead and did a background check. We hired a third party to run it, just we wanted to be sure that the company that was being retained to help us investigate, the value of some of our assets was on the up and up, and was someone we could trust. We really don't do that very often. It's a very rare occurrence because it's very expensive. But again, that's something that I would be doing in my own. Role as chief ethics and compliance officer. So again, this isn't something you guys would be involved in, but I at least want you to know the that different levels that the company has come up with to address third-party due diligence. Gifts and invitations, the key points. Any gifts, anything, anything at all that we're giving, or whether it's it could be a bottle of wine, it could be a sports tickets, anything like that, cannot be made or given with an intent to influence a decision in favor of the company. Specifically, if we have a private job that we're looking at and we're trying to get that business, it is against company policy to be sending these folks anything of value to get them to change their minds or make their minds up in favor of us. So, like, for example, if we're bidding a major project for a private entity, like a real estate developer or something like that, and then we send them, well, we're not doing it now. Most people aren't. We're not going to sporting events, but if we send them tickets to a football game or a baseball game or something like that, as a kind of a way to kind of nudge them to make their decision in favor of the company, that's the kind of thing we cannot be involved in, and it's really not something that's acceptable. Customary business courtesies are fine. So from time to time, as we just went through the holidays, people received, a gift basket or something like that that wasn't worth a lot of money or anything like that, or they received I got a little container of candy from a vendor last month. That kind of stuff's not a big deal. It's totally acceptable. Giving hats with company logos on them, giving away. It could be it could be well, not really gift cards or anything like that, but it could be just you name it. It's really things of minimal value is really what we're talking about. There are limits that are set forth in the document in the compliance procedures. I'm not going to get specifically into what they are, but giving anything over the values and those limits, it must be approved in advance, and that's by your manager and by the company's ethics officer. It's something that's that's really non-negotiable. It's clear that the companies, as much as we encourage people to develop and maintain business relationships, we want to make sure that we're being careful about these types of things and not doing something that would be seen as crossing a line. No gifts to public officials. That's been the rule for quite a bit of time. It's nothing surprising. Receiving anything over the thresholds have to be sent back. So give you an idea, the company, and I will tell you about the limits here. For example, the company has set a limit of 80 euros per person. What is the value of a gift? When I say 80 euros, it's about $90, $92, depending on the exchange rates. But if somebody sends you a gift that's worth that much, it's fine. You just want to report it. We'll walk through that in a second. But if they send you a gift that's worth more than that, that can be a sports ticket. It could be like I said, I mentioned a gift basket, a bottle of wine, year's supply of Omaha steaks, all that stuff. It's worth more, and it's not acceptable, and it would have to be sent back. There could be exceptions. There could be situations where the item is perishable, or it's just impossible to send it back for whatever reason. At that point, if it's just impossible, or it'd be rude or insulting, we could make an exception. Again, you have to go through your boss, go through your ethics officer, make sure that it's reported. And the way that would work is, I'll show you. We'll go to we're on eComply. If you've got a gift, either you would go do it directly, or depending upon your subsidiary and your internal operating procedures, you would go to your compliance officer. So let's say if it's Delta, you would contact Phil, and you had a gift to report. So you would go here, you would click on this website, and as you can see, there's this form to fill out. You put in who your manager is. You type in the name. It's already pre-populated. So I'll put in Terry LaRocque is our CEO. I'd put his name in, and then if it replies to some other entity or another person or whatever, you can do it that way as well. Then you start the process, and it just goes through. It's very simple. It just goes and it asks you, what is it, how much is it worth, who gave it to you, all that stuff, and then ultimately, it works its way through the process. It reports it on up through the chain. People who are in the reporting structure for the company, it's already pre-populated, will receive an email. They're required to click on yes or no, or if they have questions or whatever, and it works its way. The whole idea behind all of this is to create a record for 1 second here. Let me just close out of this. Is to create a record of it. So what they want to do is they want us to know that they need to know where all this information is, so that they can, if they ever have to, they can go ahead and report it to whatever regulator they have. So give you an example. In France, Colas SA and Bouygues are subject to a very strict, very detailed anti-corruption law. And so what happens is, if we have all these gifts coming from various different organizations, or if we're giving gifts or whatever, they might be asked by their regulators to report all the gifts that have been given or received on behalf of any of their employees anywhere in the world, because it doesn't just apply to what happens in France. And so then they have to upload that information to their regulators, and on a moment's notice. It's one of those things. It's not like in the U.S. where you get a subpoena and then you go and you fight back and forth about what's something that's relevant to the document. This is something that they're required by law to upload. So all this information through eComply gets funneled up through it. So any of the gifts, all that stuff gets reported through eComply. Meals and tickets, business meals, all that stuff, again, according to the threshold set forth in, I believe it's Section 4, Appendix 4 of the Colas compliance procedures. And then finally, no business travel is allowed to be, or personal travel is allowed to be given to any of our employees by third parties. That means hotel accommodations, it means airline tickets, all that stuff. It's unacceptable. And if anyone offers you that, you need to report that right away. Make sure we're aware of it. We need to make arrangements. If you do need to attend that conference or whatever it is, we'll work it out so the company would pay for it ourselves. But if anything like that comes up, please let us know. Charitable giving and sponsorships, key point. It's money, goods, and services given to charitable organizations. So it's not always cash. Sometimes we perform services for charities or for other types of organizations that need help. All of it gets reported through eComply. We require a written contract. It's something that, and so Phil and Early, they're well aware of what the requirements are. It's a one-page contract. If you want to give money to any organization, that organization has to agree to our very basic requirements, which are that none of the money can be used for any illegal or unethical, immoral purpose, or in anything that would be in contradiction or would be a violation of the law or our internal policies. It's a 2-paragraph document. It's very easy. To date, I have not had one entity or company or charity refuse to sign it. And then usually if they're refusing to sign it, that's a pretty good indication that we probably shouldn't be donating money to them anyway. But we do have that form. So if you need it or want to see it, reach out to Early or Phil, and they'll be more than happy to show you what it looks like. Make sure you follow the approval process. It's very important. What has happened, and I'm actually in the process of talking with one of our other companies, with Barrett. They've created kind of a detailed internal approval process, which is sort of separate and apart from what eComply requires. But they go through the whole entire approval process internally. Then they're ready to submit it to eComply. So by the time it gets to the electronic versions of it, it's all pretty much done, and it's just a formality. But one thing you want to understand is anything over $20,000 is going to require my boss's approval, which is Terry LaRocque, our company CEO. almost everything else below that, or every document, every donation on behalf of the company requires the company president. So for Delta, it'd be Zach, or for Sully Miller, it'd be Bill Boyd. But any donation over that not only includes their approval, but it also requires my boss's approval as well. Fraud and corruption, another area that's covered by the COLAS compliance procedures, and it's something that we're going to have to report on a regular basis to the extent it happens. But they're talking specifically about bribery, theft, forgery, collusion. When I speak about theft, I don't just mean employee theft. Anytime someone steals stuff from one of our job sites, anytime someone steals cash, tries to if we get a one of those bogus emails trying to get us to deposit money into a fake account or something like that, all that kind of stuff has to be reported. It has to be reported to your manager. Should go to your CFO. We're also going to make sure it goes to our CFO at COLAS, and it comes to me. And the way any frauds are dealt with is it's something that I then take. I write up a little bit of a report. I submit it through eComply. So that one is done by me, getting all the details from folks like you guys out there in the field. Excuse me. Any significant fraud, according to the procedures, which is anything over $50,000, or in our view, any relevant issues. So if there's any criminal exposure, there's a threat of a public agency debarment, anything like that would be overseen by our CEO and also working with our general counsel, Anthony Martino. That's the kind of thing which most theft, most fraud, most minor things or anything, those things we can handle with working with you guys locally, but anything significant, which is specifically defined, would be handled out of our office. Conflicts of interest. Personal interest conflict with company interest. We've talked about conflicts of interest many, many times. This is nothing new to you guys, so I'm not going to belabor it too much. Just understand, though, that it really can be almost anything when we're talking about conflicts. And the reason I bring that up is sometimes people are thinking, well, maybe it's not so much a conflict. I'll give you a bit of an example of a type of thing which people often think isn't a conflict. When I mentioned a minute ago, I was talking about gifts and invitations. And if, let's say, you get a gift, a very, very significant, or maybe it's a gift just under the threshold or whatever, but it's something which you really, really do like, and it's something that you really were looking forward to, or you were really happy to see. Let's say it could be a playoff ticket to your favorite football team or something like that, but it goes to you. Right? It's something only you're getting, and it's not made available to anybody else. And it happens to be in a situation, you happen to be in a position to influence a decision, for this company. And at that moment, your personal interest of receiving that gift or that ticket or whatever it is might conflict with your duty to make a decision which is in the best interest of the company. So it's those types of things. We may not think about it, but we want to be careful to when these types of things happen, to really think about what could a conflict look like, and how, sometimes it doesn't arise in the standard way. We're not talking about just your typical type of conflict where your brother has a company and your brother wants to do business with a company. Again, that could be a conflict, but it would have to be approved all the way up through the chain and stuff like that. But the bottom line is it's any situation where your personal interests conflict with the company interest, or might conflict, or could appear to conflict. We want to make sure we get all that stuff, and we make sure we know that we have to disclose everything, any kind of particular issue. Any whatever it is, any detail we want to know, because we want to be sure that we have the entire picture before we figure out a way to help you work it out. One thing I try to tell people is, my job is not I don't get paid to say no to everything. My Phil and Early know this. You guys work very closely with me. I try to make things happen. I try to make things work, and we try to come up with creative ways so that things can go forward in an ethical and compliant manner, but also in a manner that benefits the company. And but the only way we can really do that is if we have all the information at our disposal before we make a decision. If we, it would not work out well if we find out after the fact that some kind of detail, like whether there was money involved that we weren't aware of, all that kind of stuff. if we find out after the fact that we weren't told about it, that's not a good situation. All of it gets assessed by the managers, by the ethics officers, and by legal. We report the conflicts of interest through eComply. Again, I will show you how it works. This is again something that when the time comes, we may be asked to disclose it. So you go here, you click on conflicts of interest. Same thing. I'm the applicant. I put in Terry LaRock. And then we start the process. And again, I'll show you what it does. I'll start the process real quick. You see how it's set up here. So it asks you, like, what is the conflict of interest? You type in what it's all about. What is the nature of it? Is it a private client, a public client, commercial partner? Is it a subcontractor, supplier, employee, politically exposed person, which could be somebody running for office, or somebody could be a brother or sister of yours who's elected representative, whatever. You attach whatever documentations you've got, you confirm it. And so what happens is this then starts the internal process where whoever just joined us, you can mute your mic, that'd be helpful. Starts the internal process just so it creates a record. This type of thing, just so you understand, I'll cancel it out of this. Let me see here. When we're talking about a conflict, just so you understand, the point of it is to make sure, at least that there is a written record of it. It protects you as much as it protects the company. We've had situations in the past where people have had a conflict or an apparent conflict, and they thought that they spoke to their boss, or they thought that they spoke to the local HR or ethics officer, and then what happened was that when we went back to investigate it and look at it, we were unable to determine that there was any record of that, and the person who they thought they spoke with didn't have any recollection of that conversation, or maybe that person didn't work for the company anymore. And it's hard to really evaluate something if we don't have some sort of written record. So it's very important to provide these disclosures, run it through eComply, so that there's a trail of a paper trail or a digital trail showing that you did it properly. And I mentioned anybody running for public office or holds public office as well. If you want to do that, and there are people in the company who do hold, we have people that sit on city councils. I have a county supervisor. I have other people. All that stuff, it's great. We want people to be involved in the democratic process and be public servants to the extent that doesn't conflict with your duties to the company. But we need to have that all disclosed. We need to be aware of it and make the proper adjustments from the company's perspective to make sure that neither you nor the company gets put into a difficult conflict that could be hard to get out of. Membership in professional organizations, the most important thing, as I mentioned before at the very beginning of this is any membership on behalf of the company has to be approved in advance. It does not mean that if you join a local association, for example, we had a gentleman who wanted to know if he had to disclose his membership in the Knights of Columbus, right? No, you don't. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the company having a membership in a professional organization. So, for example, let's take our in Missouri. I know Don Rosenbarger, or at least Don normally works with the Missouri Asphalt Pavement Association, or MAPA. That membership is something that, to the extent we're going to renew it, or we're going to join another organization like it on behalf of Delta or Sully Miller, same thing if you're joining AGC or some other, or CalAPA or whatever, that type of thing would have to be approved in advance. We go through the same process I told you before. We would run the third-party due diligence checks. We'd run it through Compliance Catalyst, make sure there isn't anybody or anyone affiliated with that company or that organization that we might want to be concerned about. And because the reason we worry so much about professional organizations and our membership in them is because we have to appoint representatives to these organizations. And so when we send a representative to an organizational meeting, what can happen is antitrust violations. It's generally understood in my world as an attorney. When you're talking about antitrust, that's probably one of the areas which is most ripe for corruption and antitrust violations, where competitors get together and they start talking about things that they really shouldn't talk about, which is illegal. Things like prices, production capacities, carving out territories, bidding issues, all that kind of stuff we've talked about in depth in our antitrust sessions. But again, it's the kind of thing we need to be aware whether this organization has a history of it, or whether anybody involved in it at the membership, or I mean at the directorship level or the managerial level, has a history or has been convicted or anything like that. That's how we find all that stuff out. And then what we require you guys to do is, if you're going to be a member, if you're going to represent the company in these organizations, you sign a commitment saying, hey, I'm not going to violate the antitrust laws. I'm going to do things right and by the book and all that good stuff. And it's very important for our own protection going forward, and yours. I mean, any violations of these types of laws carry with them pretty significant penalties, not just for the companies, but for the individuals as well. Again, but any membership on behalf of the company has to be approved in advance, and we'll go through our due diligence. Moving on, and we're turning the corner towards the end of the presentation, which I'm sure you're all excited about, is the Right Turn 2.0. That's a copy of the cover. Most of you, I'm sure, have not seen the actual paper version of it, which was just printed back, I think, at the end of February 2020, right before COVID-19 kind of threw everything into disarray. We've got literally thousands of copies sitting all over the place, waiting to be distributed in person. And we're going to hold off on that until it's safer to do so. But that's what the cover would look like should you decide to get yourself a paper version or a PDF version. It's also available on the web. There it is at the bottom. There's the website, rightturn.colosusa.com. This is what it looks like on the web. It's available in Spanish or English. You can go navigate through the bar on the left. You click on any one of these numbered items, and it'll talk about these specific areas. We have a USA Code of Conduct, which it supplements the materials that Bouygues and Cole SSA have given us, but it shows us, it gives us a better idea of the very specific areas that we think are more relevant to how we operate here in the States. We have, we talk specifically about some fraud issues and just, dishonesty things, how that's dealt with here in the US versus other parts of the world. Same thing with company assets, public affairs, antitrust, you name it, equal employment opportunity. All this stuff is covered in the document. Again, I don't expect you to memorize it. I expect you to know where it is. I expect you to agree to comply with it. It helps from time to time to just look at it and see what's expected of you as an employee of Colas. And one of the things that we've done is, in creating or revising the new code of conduct, we revise it every 2, 3, 4 years. But one of the things we wanted to do was make sure people knew exactly what their specific responsibilities were with regard to the overall approach to building an ethical culture in the company. It's one thing I can tell you all you need to know about complying with the False Claims Act or complying with the antitrust laws, but there's some very kind of like overarching issues that we wanted to address, since we made it very clear in the document. One is, what are your responsibilities as an employee? And the first one, and again, this is something I talk about in every single presentation I give. Doesn't matter what it's about, who it's for, or whatever it is. Make sure you guys understand your responsibility to speak up as an employee. It's a requirement of your job. It is not negotiable. If you become aware of an issue, of an ethical concern, or a legal concern, it could be a human resources concern, it could be a safety issue, whatever it is, we require you to know, or we require you to speak up. Don't wait for someone else to do it. It does not work that way. You have an obligation to speak up. You also have an obligation, and this is spelled out very clearly in the new code. And the new version of it is, you have an obligation to cooperate in any investigations. We've had issues in the past where we're asking questions, we're looking into an issue, something's reported by the hotline, or there's a concern raised directly with someone like Phil or Early or whatever it is, and when you go to talk to someone and they just don't want to talk to us, they think that they can just refuse to speak to us, or they can act like they can play stupid or whatever, when we know in fact that they do have information. So we wanted to make it clear in the new document that it's a requirement of your job. It's not negotiable. People have to cooperate with us, which means answering any questions. If you have documents, provide the documents. Make yourself available. We do everything we can to protect people's anonymity or their confidentiality. We generally don't share that kind of information with anybody else that doesn't need to know it. But it's very important people know that it's an obligation to cooperate. If you're a manager, and I know there are many managers on this call, One thing you have to do is ensure your team complies with the code of conduct and with all of our company policies. The way they engage, the way they interact with one another, the way they operate needs to be in a manner consistent with our company policies and the law and our ethical responsibilities. And to the extent they don't, that is something that is on you as a manager. So you make sure, have regular discussions, talk about, with your teams about the importance of speaking up and in cooperating and feeling free to come forward with us whenever there's a concern. And and because we want people to come forward, because we're telling people they have an obligation to speak up, the only way that works is if we know that the company doesn't retaliate against employees for doing so. So it's easy. I know that's the thing. People are like, "Oh, well, Dan, it's easy for you to say. You're sitting there in New Jersey, but if I've got a complaint or if I have an issue, I'm afraid to say something because I'm putting a target on my back, right? I'm afraid to stick my neck out because I don't want to get fired. I don't want to get yelled at. I don't want to get retaliated against. I don't want I don't want to lose my promotion. I don't want to, I don't want to lose my raise this year or my bonus, things like that." So because the only way to prevent that from happening is to make sure we know that we take every issue seriously and we handle every matter confidentially, and we don't retaliate anyone who comes forward with a concern in good faith. I can tell you this: I've worked with Phil and I've worked with Early and your company leaders, Zach and Bill Boyd. And John Harrington and Robert Ponton, and I've worked with them very closely, and they all understand that any time somebody comes forward with an issue, whatever that issue is, we take it seriously and we handle it confidentially. We don't, shoot out an email to the world telling everyone that somebody complained about this. We do it as quietly and as seriously as we can. There might be times where we can't, it's impossible to keep someone's identity out of it, but that's why we make it clear that we don't retaliate against anyone who comes forward with something in good faith. That's a bedrock principle of our compliance program. We take it very seriously. Anybody violating that non-retaliation policy will usually find themselves without a job. So it's very important you understand you can come forward, you can speak up, and we give you a number of different areas or number of different vehicles to use to speak up if you need to make sure that you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and you know the company has your back when you come forward. Now, I mentioned in good faith, again, the only disclaimer we throw out, lawyers, we like to have disclaimers for everything. The only disclaimer I would put in there is that good faith means believing it to be true. If you come forward with a belief that somebody said something or did something because you heard them or you saw it, or somebody you trust told you about it, that's a good faith belief that it's true. If, on the other hand, you decide that you want somebody to get in trouble or get fired and you make up something about them that they didn't do just to get them in trouble, that's bad faith. That's something where we reserve the right to take action against somebody who would seek to injure somebody that way. So it's very important that the subject matter that you are coming forward with, you have to believe it to be true. It's helpful if you have evidence and other stuff like that, but just know that's the important part of it. Going forward, key risk areas. We're going to finish up on this. I just wanted to hit a couple things. I'm not going to get into too much detail. We've talked about a lot of this stuff over the years and in our various presentations. You guys also, most of you guys see my ethics alerts, and so a lot of this stuff is covered in these too. But I want to kind of give you an idea of what I think to be our main concerns from a risk perspective around the United States. One, the biggest one is the False Claims Act at the federal level, and in some states, I know California has its own False Claims Act. Anytime you're doing work for any governmental agency, if there's federal or state money involved, to the extent you deliver something that is substandard, that is substandard and you don't disclose it, or you deliver something that is out of specification that is out of specification or you suspect it might be, and you don't disclose that, any sort of defective material that we allow to be delivered without a disclosure, without an written approval from the customer, anything like that, you're asking to be paid for it, you're potentially violating the federal or state False Claims Act. That involves serious penalties, significant dollar damages and fines. It involves jail time for individuals who engage in that type of behavior. And it could also involve the company losing its ability to bid work. anywhere in the United States. So the False Claims Act, we tend to believe we view as our major risk area. So and because we're out there selling products and services to our public customers, we want to make sure we're doing it right. We're doing it according to spec, and doing it, doing everything in a way that our behavior and our products and services can't be called into question. Harassment and discrimination, we'll talk about in a second. Wage and hour fraud also can fall under the False Claims Act, but it's important you understand, people trying to cheat the system, either whether it's through shorting people of hours or overcharging for wage and hour, things like that. Again, could be a False Claims Act violation. Could also be a separate violation, which could lead to the company being debarred or suspended. DBE fraud, we've talked about this past year in our DBE compliance training sessions. You make sure that you follow your compliance policies with good faith efforts and making sure our DBEs are performing their commercial useful function. And if there are ever any questions or any concerns, let us know. We're more than happy to help you, but it's very important we follow that. DBE fraud is still pretty prevalent throughout the United States, especially some of the states where the government hasn't been as aggressive in enforcing it. We're seeing some upticks and reports of potential violations. We want to make sure, not on our side, but not from our perspective, but from other competitors of ours. So we want to make sure we're on top of that. Antitrust violations, already spoke about that. Bribery and kickbacks, always a bad thing, never legal, so we don't do that. Risk area is vendor and customer relationships, we've talked about, which is why we engage in our third-party due diligence. Conflicts of interest, we spoke about. Political activity, as one thing that we've been very clear on over the years is Colas as a company and none of our subsidiaries, we do not donate any money to any political party or any politician or any candidate for political office. It's a bedrock principle. Again, we do not do it. We won't do it. We stay neutral. As a public customer, as a public contractor, the company made a decision long ago that we believe it's better to stay neutral and to just play it down the middle. We don't take sides, and I think based on everything that we're seeing these days, is probably a good thing to continue doing. So we just don't even bother asking us to donate money to a guy running for mayor or some woman running for governor of a state. We just don't do it. We don't get involved in it. We have in the past donated money to causes that we believed were, it could be an educational campaign to convince the people to vote for a gas tax increase. We did it successfully in California a couple of years ago. We've, I think, done it in the past in Missouri. It's important you guys know that those types of things we still run through our normal checks. We still run through our procedures. But we do go forward and make sure that the whoever is taking that money is doing it in a legal and ethical manner. But it's usually done to educate people about the importance of things like transportation spending and other stuff like that. And then charities and sponsorships we already got into. Wrapping it up. You guys go through your EEO training. I'm not here to go through it again. I just want to make sure you understand that the company has and continues to take a very principled and important approach to compliance with federal and state non-discrimination and harassment laws. We just don't engage in it. We don't accept it. We don't tolerate it. Any whisper of it. We investigate very seriously, and we take whatever actions we need to enforce these rules and to make sure that our company operates in a manner consistent with them and with our values. There's no tolerance for it. And our friends, my friends Phil and Early, know that to be true. And so please, if there are ever any concerns, you ever have any issues or any thoughts or any feeling that this type of discrimination is going on for whatever reason whatsoever, please report it and let us know so we can take care of it. Unlawful harassment. I bring this up because we've had some concerns in the past year, even though many of us have gone remote and working, not working in offices right now or haven't been. We've still seen an uptick in the last year or two of things, harassment by phone or by email, by text message or whatever it is. It's not acceptable, whether it's in the office, in person, in your face, or it's on a phone or on a computer terminal or an iPad or whatever it is. It's not acceptable. So sending any type of physical, verbal, or visual statements, any sort of pictures, any sort of images, any jokes, anything like that. Um, Trying to convince a coworker to go on a date with you when they don't want to, all that kind of stuff is to the extent it's unwelcome, which most of it is. It's just not acceptable. The company doesn't allow it, and we've had some problems in the past couple of years where managers have engaged in that type of behavior with people they worked with or that worked for them. Anything that would be offensive to a reasonable person. Like, for example, we had a manager about a year ago who, another part of the company, who was sending really improper images to a woman who was a flagger on one of his crews. And she was married. She didn't appreciate it. She kept telling him to stop. He wouldn't stop. He thought it was funny. She didn't think it was funny, but she was also afraid to complain about it because he was her boss. And then got to a point where the woman finally couldn't take it anymore, and I think her husband found out about it as well. And we had to intervene and make sure that manager was dealt with properly, which basically meant the guy lost his job. But the kind of conduct that we're talking about here went on for several weeks and months, and it went unreported because she was afraid of retaliation. And so we had to make it clear to her that there would be no negative consequences for her talking to us. And once we made sure she was comfortable with that, we took the proper steps. So very important to report that stuff. Again, contact if complain about it, speak to your manager. If they're the ones doing it, contact HR. But if you don't want to contact HR, you can call the hotline. And again, we sit here, we talk about the hotline. And a lot of folks need to understand that the hotline is a tool. It's there for your use. It's there if you for whatever reason don't want people to know that you're the person who called up or had an issue. That's the way to do it. You can do it anonymously. This hotline is managed by a third party called Conversant. It is not run by Colas. It is a vendor of ours that handles this for us. Every report that goes to the system, whether it's called in by the 800 number, it's texted in through the SMS system, or it's reported right here where you click Get Started and report an incident. If you want to remain anonymous, there's no way for me to find out who you are or where you're from or anything like that. You just need to give us enough details so that we can actually investigate the incident. Once you report it, it gives you an access number. You create your own personal password, so we don't know who it is. And you can go in and you can check on the status of the investigation. Again, use it. It's there. There are a lot of times people are perfectly comfortable contacting Phil or Early, contacting their boss, contacting their company's president, whatever, because they don't have, they're not worried about anything. They just want them to know that there's an issue they want reported. But there are times where you just don't want people to know. So you take the proper step of reporting it through the hotline. Anonymously. There's no way for us to know who you are. We don't even try to find out who you are. And you, whatever information you give us, to the extent we can follow up on it, we do. We do it very quickly. As I mentioned before, we do it anonymously. We do it confidentially. We do it seriously. And hopefully there's enough information for us to take action on. But it's very important you guys understand this. The hotline works. We've had we get a number of calls per year, and it really does help us avoid some pretty significant problems. It has done so in the past, and it will continue to do so, but only if you guys feel comfortable using it. So please use it if you need to. And we always encourage you guys to feel comfortable coming forward to your corporate leaders, but know that this is there for you should you just want to remain anonymous. With that, we're done. I just wanted to finish up by saying thank you to you guys for giving me this the opportunity to present this information to you today. I know you guys have a lot of stuff going on your plate. I know you guys have a lot of things going on with bidding and winter maintenance and other stuff like that. So thank you for giving me this your time this morning. I'm here as a resource for you guys. If you guys have questions, if you have concerns, feel free to contact me. When you want to go through Phil or Early or your boss or whatever, that's fine too. But just know that my job is here to help you guys do yours. And I can't do it unless you guys reach out to me. So please, don't hesitate to call me with any questions whatsoever. Absolute open door, or in this case, open open Teams or open cell phone accessibility. So please reach out to me if you need anything. With that, we've been doing this for exactly an hour. I just want to say, please be safe out there, stay healthy, and I look forward to hopefully 2021 improving as the weeks and months go on, and hopefully I'll be able to get out and visit some of you guys in the not too distant future just to say hello. But with that, we are done. Phil, if you want to go ahead and stop recording, I will talk to you guys the next time we see each other. All right. Thank you.